Welcome to today's National Archives Know Your Records program. We are broadcasting live from the National Archives building in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who are here on site, I'd like to give you a few tips. Hopefully you picked up the handouts that I left outside on the table. If not, let me know if you didn't get a copy. There are 3 handouts today. And also, we will take your questions at the end of the presentation. We just ask that because we are live broadcasting, we want to capture your voice. And if you could come to either microphone in the aisle when you have your question at the end of the presentation. For those of you who are watching online, welcome. You can also find the presentation handouts in hyperlinks underneath the video screen. Just go to those links and it'll take you right there. You will also find a hyperlink to live captioning. Also, you can participate in the question and answer period by typing in your questions in the chat feature on this YouTube webpage. So you just first have to log in. So today's program is entitled Dead Men and Women Sometimes Do Tell Tales, Death Records from the Numerical Identification System for Genealogical Research by John LeGloahec. This presentation will highlight the recent release of the death files from the Numerical Identification System and discuss their use in genealogical research. John will also draw parallels to other records in our Access to Archival Databases, as well as other Numerical Identification System files, which will be available soon. Now about our presenter, John LeGloahec. He joined the National Archives in June 2006 as an archive specialist in the Electronic Records Division. Since 2013, he has been a full-time member of the Electronic Records Reference branch. He holds a master's in library science from the University of Albany and a master's in social studies education from Long Island University. Prior to joining us, John worked at the International Monetary Fund Archives and the Rockefeller Archive Center, where he was a supervisor of the Nelson A. Rockefeller Papers Project. John is very active professionally and has served as treasurer and chair of the Mid-Atlantic Regional Archives Conference. He has also served as president and treasurer of the National Archives Assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, please Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our presenter, John LeGloahec.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and good afternoon, everyone, to both the people here in the room as well as people joining us online. Welcome to this Know Your Records presentation on the Numerical Identification Files, or NUMIDENT, which are available from the National Archives and Records Administration online portal, Access to Archival Databases, or AAD. I'm very pleased to be here with you today to discuss this new series, which we've been able to make available to researchers hoping to fill in some holes in their genealogical research. Now, the Electronic Records Division of the National Archives has been accessioning, preserving, and providing access to the records of the federal government for nearly 50 years. The records maintained by the Electronic Records Division range from raw data files to item-level records, PDF documents, emails, and electronic cables. The majority of the records are from the latter half of the 20th century, with some records dating back to the World War II era. In most cases, electronic records are transferred to the National Archives because of their risk of technological obsolescence. If the raw data is relatively clean, the records can be processed and made available within a short period of time. For example, just within a few years of the end of the Vietnam War, the National Archives had accessioned many of the operational and casualty records of that conflict. Also, the Electronic Records Division has in its custody records that are just a few years old, which benefits researchers working on contemporary research topics. The division was very pleased to receive the Numerical Identification Files, or NUMIDENT, from the Social Security Administration because these records contain names, births, and death dates of deceased Social Security holders. Our unit was equally excited to make the NUMIDENT records available through AAD, as there are a lot of genealogists out there who really like looking for people both dead and alive. Now, NARA's access to archival databases is an essential tool for researchers, especially genealogists, to locate information in archival databases about their ancestors. AAD contains more than 172 million individual records across 65 different series. Now, if you're a fan of my work and you've seen my other NARA YouTube presentations, you'll note the uptick in the number of records available through AAD, which is reflective of the addition of nearly 50 million records from the NUMIDENT system. AAD covers subjects ranging from genealogy and personal history topics like immigration and military casualty and service records to government spending and international relations, to name just a couple of examples. The greatest feature of AAD, though I might be a little biased, is that it takes the raw data and presents it in a user-friendly format to search and view individual records. Now, the system is used millions of times each year, more than 2.6 million hits in the previous fiscal year, and thousands of times per month, over 9,000 queries in the last fiscal quarter, and hundreds of times per day. I've used the analogy before that AAD is sort of the self-service gas pump of the National Archives. It's a researcher can just pull up to the portal and get whatever they're looking for with relative ease. Now, shortly I'll use the NUMIDENT records to demonstrate the way that you can easily find records of interest. Now, access to archival databases is very easy to use with the records available in a variety of displays. You can conduct a free text search across AAD by placing a search term in the green box on the AAD homepage. You can also narrow your search by clicking on any of the categories that are listed in the red box, or you can further identify records arranged by subject matter by clicking on the Browse All Subjects to the right of the red box, the lower right-hand corner of the red box. You will note on the screenshot that we feature a What's New on AAD, and you can see there that the first item there are the NUMIDENT files, which are the most recent set of files that we've made available. Now, if you need some assistance, you can go back to school on searching in AAD by clicking on the Getting Started guide with the icon of the chalkboard that will help you further navigate AAD. Also, a handout was made available in advance of the presentation, as Andrea mentioned, and which is a quick guide to AAD searching. So let's have a closer look at the NUMIDENT files. Now, there are currently three types of NUMIDENT records: death records, which is the focus of this presentation, application records, and claim records. Now, there is overlap between the three sets in that a record for an individual may appear in one, two, or all three sets of records. The series contains records for every Social Security number assigned to individuals with a verified death or who would have been over 110 years old by December 31st, 2007. So there are 49,459,293 death records in NUMIDENT, which covers the time period from 1936 through 2007. When the records were transferred to the National Archives, there were 20 separate files which were merged into 9 alphabetically arranged files at the National Archives. At this time, only the death records are available for searching in AAD, but we are in the process of making the other 2 sets of records available in the near future. Information contained in the NUMIDENT death records primarily includes the individual's full name, their Social Security number, the date of birth, date of death, and their last zip code. It is noteworthy, as we will see in some of the examples coming up, that the death records in NUMIDENT do not include any state-reported deaths in accordance with Section 205R of the Social Security Act. Approximately 10 to 30% of all reported deaths to the Social Security Administration are state-reported deaths. There are only records for individuals who received a Social Security number, so you will not find records for individuals who never received a Social Security number for one reason or another. In addition, as a result of the Social Security Administration beginning automated computer processing of the records in 1962, information on deaths prior to 1962 may be incomplete or missing. And here's the big disclaimer: the absence of a record for a person is not proof that the person is alive, though I will illustrate shortly that one individual who some think is still alive is really dead, according to NUMIDENT. Now, most people have heard of the Social Security Death Index, or SSDI, which is a database of death records created from the Social Security Administration. So you may ask, well, what's the big fuss about NUMIDENT? Isn't it the same thing? Actually, no. The NUMIDENT death records available on AAD are output from the master files of the Social Security holders and Social Security number applications, also known as the enumeration system. The Social Security Death Index contains records derived from the Social Security Administration's death master file, which is an extract of the death information in NUMIDENT. The NUMIDENT death records available on AAD contain some of the information that is used to create the Social Security Death Index. In addition, the Social Security Death Index usually includes fields of information for state Social Security number issued and a lump sum payment. However, these are not fields in the NUMIDENT death records, but this information may be in the NUMIDENT SS5 application files or claim records, which are not yet available. Now, as I mentioned, you can search the NUMIDENT files on a variety of search terms, including the individual's Social Security number, first and/or last name, date of birth or death, as well as the last reported zip code of the individual. Search terms can be placed in the free text box under the green banner. And to search for an individual's Social Security number, enter the number without any dashes, simply the 9-digit number. You can search by an individual's last name or first name. You can also add a middle name and/or a suffix, though you would need to alter the search fields on the default screen. First names are limited to 16 characters and last names are 21 characters long. You may also utilize wildcard searches like the % or the asterisk to help with searches that may contain a spelling error. In most, if not all, the middle name is only an initial, and AAD ignores punctuation in names. So for Mr. O'Neill or your ancestor's hyphenated last name, you won't need that punctuation. You can find additional information on searches in the FAQs that were distributed earlier, along with additional details on searching names with punctuation and/or spaces. It is worth noting that the 9 death records are arranged by last name, and for last names that erroneously begin with a number or a punctuation mark for whatever reason, those records are available in the 9th file, last names U through Z and non-alphabetic. By searching at the broadest level, you may return more results than you are looking for. Using the specific search fields, you will likely have more refined results and a better likelihood of locating the individual or individuals that you are seeking. One additional field in the death files that can be searched is zip code, including indicating the last known zip code for the individual. However, this field does contain inconsistencies, as the resident zip code is blank in 27% of the records. The zip code may be the 5-digit number or may include the +4 zip code suffix, and there also may be some X's in the field. And it is worth noting that AAD only displays the zip code and not the corresponding town or city. Zip code boundaries can change over time, and so to identify the corresponding town or city, researchers will need to locate the zip code at the time of death listed in the record. Now, dates of birth and/or dates of death may be searched specifically by a range. Some of the records are missing selected date information, so it is better to start at the broadest levels and then narrow your search. Searching by year first, then adding a month, and finally a day will help refine the search to find the records you may be seeking. For the month and day, you simply select a number from the code list, for example, 12 for December and 25 for, well, Christmas Day. And then for the year field, you can search equals, between, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to, in order to locate a range of years if you are unsure of the exact year of someone's birth or death. You may search by date of birth, date of death, or both. You may select multiple months from the code list, and if you're unsure of what month the individual you're searching for example, didn't Grandma die in the winter? Boy, it was really hot when Grandpa died, wasn't it? So you can say summer, winter, pick the months. Please note that there are approximately 10 million records in NUMIDENT that have some inaccuracy in either the birth date field or the death date field. To cite a few examples, there are more than one record with individuals that show an individual, for instance, specifically who was born in 1808 and listed as having died in 1973. There's a second individual who was listed as being born in 1874 and died in 2001 at the ripe age of 127. There's also a record for an individual who is listed as having been born in 1984, yet died in 1956. So there is a need to verify the dates that you are searching on. There are also several fields in the records that are not populated at all. Several reasons for this. Some of the fields were populated on an exception basis. What this means is that the default version for that field was blank, and it was only populated to indicate that there is an exception. This is the case with the special date of birth exception indicator, special exception change indicator, master beneficiary record exception fields. For these fields, the code list only includes the code that indicates the exception and does not include the default value of blank. Only 1% of the records have values in these fields. Now, it appears that the agency created these records with the flexibility to add more information in the future. The filler fields are blank fields that the agency could use in the future. These fields are not populated currently, and the agency may not have needed to populate a field or lacked the information to do so. So let's dive in and have a look at some specific NUMIDENT records. So there's something to be said of fame and or notoriety. When you pass, your death garners a certain level of interest. As you can see on this slide, here are the NUMIDENT entries for 3 individuals, Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, and Gerald Ford. All of these named individuals were at one point President of the United States. All 3 individuals are indeed deceased. But according to NUMIDENT, 2 of them, Richard Nixon on line 4 in the second image, and Gerald Ford, not the name that he was born with, Leslie King, as he had changed his name when he was adopted by the Ford family. President Ford's application file does indicate his birth name. So there's an interesting parallel here in that most of the records for married women, they are listed by their married names and not their maiden names. Now, here's another example that certain people will find either affirming or greatly disappointing. There are many people out there who may wish to believe that Elvis is still alive. There is the famous photo seen above that misspells Presley's name on a roadside historical marker, which led many to believe that Elvis was in fact still alive. He'd faked his own death. In the other image of Elvis's gravestone, you can see that his name is spelled correctly. Now, to confirm all of this, we can go into NUMIDENT and see that Elvis Presley, one of 4 Elvis Presley found in the NUMIDENT files, was born in January of 1935, died in August of 1977. The death was reported in NUMIDENT in December of 1977. It's on the internet. It must be true. Elvis is dead, folks. For our next example, it's beyond dispute that the Reverend Martin Luther King was killed by an assassin in April of 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. However, as you can see by Dr. King's record in NUMIDENT, the file was posted to the system in 1988, more than 20 years after his death. There is no explanation for this inconsistency, though you can also see that the record is somewhat incomplete when you compare it to other records in NUMIDENT, as his date of birth is indicated as not captured or reported, or is the actual day of his death, which was April 12th. Now, yesterday, March 22nd, would have been my mother's 87th birthday, but as you can see from this NUMIDENT record, my mother died 11 years ago last month. When we started reviewing these files before adding them to AAD, we tested the files by running queries against the records, and I searched for my mother's record, which I knew was in the Social Security index, the Social Security Death Index, so I assumed it would be in these records as well. I located the record for my mother and was reminded that her last name is spelled incorrectly, though all of the other information contained in the record is correct: her date of birth, her date of death, and other information that was entered into the system. I will add here that the National Archives does not change records that have been accessioned into our custody, even for me, and I work here. The creating agency may change the records, and if I really wanted the record to be corrected, I could file a request with the Social Security Administration to correct the spelling of my mother's last name. Now, despite whatever they might tell you, computers are not perfect. As a result, and as we've just seen, there are any number of reasons why you might not be able to locate the records in which you are interested. As noted earlier, the NUMIDENT death files do not include all deaths between 1936 and 2007. In particular, state-reported deaths are not in NUMIDENT and reflect between 10% and 30% of all reported deaths. Also, as previously mentioned, the files do not include deaths for individuals who never had a Social Security number. Some individuals may not have ever applied for a Social Security number, nor received one. Also, sadly, in some cases, children who died in infancy may not have yet received a Social Security number at the time of their death. Thirdly, once the Social Security Administration began maintaining death information using automated methods in 1962, it resulted in some information on deaths prior to 1962 to be incomplete or missing. And also, as just noted with my mother's record, some of the records contain misspellings or other inaccuracies. You may have success with a variety of spellings or names or broaden your search. There are a total of 63 records out of 50 million, that's pretty good, that contain some punctuation mark instead of a letter if an individual's name and is found in that last file, last names U through Z, and non-alphabetic. It's important to also make sure that you are searching in the correct file. There are 9 NUMIDENT death files organized alphabetically by last name. If you know the last name, be sure you are searching in the correct file. Please note that it's possible that the last name may be spelled with a different first letter, for example, a C instead of an S. So you may need to search in more than one file using different spellings. Now, once the nearly 50 million death records were made available through AAD, staff at the Electronic Records Reference Branch began working on the other 2 parts of the NUMIDENT system, the application files and the claim records. The NUMIDENT application form, the SS5, is the next set of records that will be made available alongside the death files. The records contain information extracted from the SS5 form, application for a Social Security card, or application for a Social Security account number. Information found in the NUMIDENT application entries include an applicant's full name, parents' names, sex, place of birth, and other information about the application or subsequent changes to the applicant's records. There are more than 72 million records in the application files covering individuals with a verified death or who would have been 110 by December 31st, 2007. Now, once the application files are completed, NARA staff will work on adding the claim entries to AAD, which contain information on the type of claim, life or death, the individual's full name, date of birth, sex, parents' names, and place of birth. The transfer of the claim records contains more than 25 million records. Now, if you're still stuck, as with most of the series available through AAD, the National Archives has created a list of frequently asked questions, or FAQs, to assist researchers with finding information in the files. If you're interested in more information about the 9-digit number that follows you throughout life, and in this particular presentation, through death, you may wish to read The Story of the Social Security Number, which was written in 2009 by Carolyn Puckett, who was an employee of the Office of Research, Evaluation, and Statistics, Office of Retirement and Disability Policy in the Social Security Administration. She had a really big business card. Both of these documents were made available prior to this presentation. So thank you all for your attention on this great topic, albeit a bit morbid. But if our ancestors weren't able to tell us anything, how would we learn from our past? The Electronic Records Reference Branch looks forward to assisting you with your searches, and we can be reached via email at the address listed, or individuals should also feel free to contact me directly. And I am happy to answer any questions that may have come in during the presentation or that people may have in the room. And again, I'll remind what Andrea pointed out. If you are in the room and have a question, please come to one of the microphones at the end. But thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. So if you have any questions, like John said, come to the microphones if you're in the, here with us online. And if you are watching on YouTube, go ahead and submit your questions to me via chat. And I do have several questions that have come online. So I'll start with one of those, and then we'll go to our audience here in the building. The first question, for the fields where the default is blank and only exceptions are noted, is there a way to do a search for the records that are not blank?
Well, as I pointed out, I think it was only about 20% have some sort of exception. But what you could do, and we can, so when you pull up any particular of the file, and you would go to show more fields, and so, for instance, special date of birth exception indicator, you could look at the code list, and so you would see that in this particular field, the default code is B. So you could add that field to your search, and then you could search, add the letter B to that search, and it would show you any records in which that field has been populated.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I just have two questions. One is the, you mentioned the Social Security card and then a Social Security account number. What's the difference between the two?
Your Social Security card contains your Social Security account on it, which is your Social Security number.
Okay. All right. And then the other thing was when you do a search, I missed the part. If I add, let's say, a name, and then I add a date of birth, is it going to be an or type of search? So in other words, it's going to, or is it going to always be an and, or can I designate an and and an or for those fields?
Did you have somebody in specific you'd like to look for?
I guess we could.
Sure.
The last name is
All right.
Belair.
So B as in boy?
Yeah, Bellaire.
So you would put in whatever information that you would want to, and as I suggested, you could start at the broadest levels and narrow down. So what you could do is put in the person's individual name, Belair.
Yeah, two L's,
L's.
an AIR and an E at the end.
And then either a date of birth year or a date of death year.
Yes, so say date of death, 2000 and, what would that be? 20,
All right, see now
15.
here's an indication,
20,
as I was talking
16,
about, is
2016.
the ability to be able to search from a range.
Right.
So,
Well, 2015.
you're
let's
not
say.
exactly sure, you could say, all right, well, we believe that it was between,
Yeah, say 2014 and 2016.
oh, that's not going to be in here, because these files only go to 2007.
Oh, 2007,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I guess, yeah, we'll go ahead and put in then,
So we'll just say, for argument's sake, we'll look
no,
for.
go ahead. You can put in, let me think for a second. You got me on the spot here.
Sure.
Let me think. Put in
Live searching an age.
1980 through 1985. Now, but my question is can I do and or, in other words, maybe I want to find all the Belairs, but it might not even be in that date range, you know?
Well, this search that we've just plugged in here, this will bring back anything with the last name of Belair,
Right.
who died between 1980 and 1985. And there is only one record in NUMIDENT, and it is a Clara Belair, who was born August 22nd, 1919, and died in December of 1980.
Okay. So it's going to be an and type of search, so both have to match in order to.
That
for
is
it to be found.
correct.
Okay, so
Yes.
I couldn't say, I'm looking for a certain person with this last name, and do a search and say, or that was born in this date range. So it would give me all the records for all those things. It would-
Right, and say, you have the ability to plug in any or all or none of the information that you, so say, if you start with a last name,
Yeah,
and then you can say, all right, I found 100 Belairs.
right.
And you say, all right, now I want to go and see all of the Belairs who died in this date range.
Okay.
And then you just go in and you narrow down and you drill down into the results.
All right.
To be able to find what you're looking for.
Thank you.
If we have more questions, again, if you could make your way to the microphone. In the meanwhile, I have about at least 5 questions from
All
our
right.
online audience, so we'll just keep
Very
going.
exciting.
Yes, great questions. Let's see, we've got a more general question. The person is not familiar with the term state-reported death. So I was wondering if you could explain the different types of reported deaths, in that field.
She's not alone. The individual is not alone. What is a state-reported death is it is the mystery of the century. What we are saying is that Section 205R of the Social Security Act says state-reported deaths will be reported this way. So they were reported to the Social Security Administration, but for some reason, they did not go into the NUMIDENT system. So, just because if you are a state-reported death, it didn't mean you didn't die. It just means that your information is not in these records.
Okay, hopefully that helps. It sounds like it.
If she finds out more, please have her
Right.
tell us.
Please write to us and tell us. I have a couple of questions that came in about SS5s. The first one is, once information from SS5s are uploaded, can interested parties still get a copy of the original SS5?
These records, the SS5 records that we bring in will, so this will be the entirety of the information. The actual paper application forms are, in most cases, applications and forms like that, contracts, things like that, are not usually considered permanent records, and so those records probably will not be extant anymore.
Fair enough. Thank you. So once they're in there, it's a good chance they're not available anymore.
This will be the best representation of that data.
Okay. Our next question about the SS5s, can John tell us about what fields might need to be redacted when the SS5s are added to AAD? So what might be removed for personally identifiable information?
Well, the information that is contained in those SS5 records as I pointed out, some of the fields that are normally available is everybody who's in those files, those SS5 records, they are deceased. And unless it is a very young child, it is more than likely that their parents, which would have been listed in the SS5 record as well, would have likely have been dead as well. Because unless you were younger than 110 years old in 2007, that record will not be released as part of the SS5 records.
Okay.
So it's A, are you dead? Or B, are you older than 110? So if those two things were not satisfied, their record would not be released.
Okay, thank you. I'll just note the comments that I'm getting online about why they wanted the original. It might be because they want to see a signature of the person, or if something was there was a strike through. So that's what was behind those questions. Next question, can John tell us more about the field which refers to another SSN?
This is the other number field, which contains, according to the agency, and I just want to refer to my notes here. The other number is a claims account number for Title II and Black Lung, as well as the house under number for Title 16. 13% of the records that are in NUMIDENT are blank or have a null value for these fields, and that's what the agency reported to us when they sent us the records, that's what they used that field for. And so at this point, that's pretty much all we know about it at this point.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions from our audience here? If not, I'll continue on. We have a very active online audience. I'm not sure which this goes back to. Someone asked, are clone extensions added to them too? Clone extensions.
I'm not familiar with what a clone extension would be.
Oh, okay, here we go. They just clarified. Advanced directives giving extensions life would make an extension of life to a previous end-of-life legislation. Oh, wait a minute, this is odd. We're going to skip that one. Let's go on to something that's more pertaining to our actual records. There was some discussion about when you said if there's a mistake in the records.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you could go back and clarify if it's possible to make a correction and how, if there's some mistake in the records or in AAD, how would one go about fixing that?
Well, as I pointed out, the first thing is that the National Archives doesn't change records that have been accessioned into our custody. If you locate an error in AED or anywhere, you would have to go back to the creating agency. So in the case of my mother's record, which is spelled incorrectly, I could petition the Social Security Administration and say, hey, look, her name is spelled wrong here. I'd like it to be spelled right, in the next set of records. So what they could do is they could go in and say, okay, well, we're going to correct the spelling error, and then they will send a new set of records to replace the ones that are incorrect. We get that a lot with people, veterans, who will say, this is wrong, I was, wounded on this date and not this date, my buddy was killed on this date and not this date. Well, this is what we say. This is what, the agency told us at the time. you can go back to whatever agency created these records and say, that's the thing.
Thank you.
So I think it varies by agency.
Very
Is
good.
to who, you go back to the agency and say, this is wrong, how would you make it right?
Thank you. I'm going to step up here with you. We don't have any more questions,
right.
actually. I think you did an excellent job of answering all of our questions. So I want to thank everybody who attended today's program. And if you have additional questions, our presenter, John LeGloahec, very kindly offered his own email address, or you can submit questions to inquire@nara.gov. That's INQUIRE. Thank you on behalf of the National Archives and our presenter, John, for attending. And also I'll say that this presentation will remain online if you want to review it. And if you are interested in a transcript, I will get that about a month later. Just send a message to the Know Your Records program, KYR, at nara.gov. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.